Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and we're starting in a rather unusual place here. I'm going to get round to my topic of race and ethnicity eventually, but I've got a little surprise. I did make the koya, you remember when I was making the kulfi a couple of weeks ago, and I had mentioned that making clotted cream was not really possible because we have ultra pasteurized cream here and it doesn't work, and so instead I was making a refined evaporated milk. And I mentioned that another way that you could make the kulfi ice cream was by whipping up some cream with condensed milk, which I did, and I froze that, and that worked out okay. But most of the cream and condensed milk I just left in the refrigerator, and look what happened. It actually turned into clotted cream because the refrigerator is a dehydrating place, and the moisture evaporated and I got left with clotted cream. Not quite like Devon clotted cream, but close. And so what I'm going to do right now, I don't have any scones, but I have a bun which I've toasted. I'm going to add some strawberry jam and have clotted cream on top for my cream tea. So here we are. Not perfect, not quite the cream teas I'm used to because I don't have scones, I don't have the time to prepare them, but nice clotted cream, good enough. I'm going to have my cream tea and you can watch the credits, and then we'll get started on race and ethnicity. Now let's talk specifically about race and ethnicity, and I'm going to ramble, I'm sure, because there's so much to talk about beyond what I talked about last time. Last time I mentioned the fact that race is not a biological characteristic, it is a social construct in the same way that ethnicity is a social construct. But they're different kinds of social constructs because race is based on what people perceive as biological characteristics, particularly facial characteristics, as well as skin color in general, but a combination of skin color and what you see in people's faces, their eyes, the shape of the eyes, the color of the eyes, the kind of hair they have, whether it's curly or straight, or what color it is, and so forth. Color plays a very important part, whether it be the skin or the eyes, the hair, very important. And ethnicity is a social construct that has a kind of internal consistency. That is, that people self-identify as a certain ethnic group, and the ethnic group has certain boundaries which are set by the ethnic group themselves. Okay, so that's so far so good. But the problem with ethnicity is that it depends where you are what ethnicity means. It's different in the United States, in the Russian Federation, in China. They have different concepts of what ethnicity is. But it's clearly socially constructed. But it's not based just on physical features. Physical features play a part, but other social features such as religion, foodways, clothing, language, very important. They all contribute to what makes an ethnicity, whereas race tends to be focused more on physical features. Now here, there's some initial complexities, and one of them is that people will often say, oh, I don't see color, meaning that they don't identify anybody in racial terms. Well, sorry, that's nonsense. We all make classifications based on the way people look, and those classifications can be various. They can be things like socioeconomic class, for example. You look at somebody and you identify them as high class, low class, middle class, whatever, or sympathetic, generous, angry. We make judgments looking at people's faces all the time. And one of those judgments is based on physical characteristics. That's just the nature of humanity. And humans, by their very nature, I mean, I'm sorry to use the word nature, but it is our human condition to classify things. We can't have language if we don't classify things, because we have to classify things into nouns like colors and so forth. And we classify people. That's just the way it is. The difference between what W.E.B. Du Bois called a racialist and a racist is that a racialist sees different races, and a racist is prejudiced towards certain races. Well, what I was saying last time was that race isn't a very good classification system, that ethnicity is better, not best, better. But we have some problem here. One of the problems is that when we talk about prejudice, we almost invariably use the term racist. There isn't an equivalent for ethnicist, somebody who is biased against somebody ethnically. But here's where anthropology steps in a little bit. Now, Margaret Mead, towards the end of her life, in the early 1970s, when I actually met her, as it happens, she came to the University of North Carolina when I was a graduate student, and very interesting meeting. Anyway, I won't go into Margaret Mead right now, but I will make one point that I disagree with her about. She had a debate with James Baldwin. I think it was around 1971, something like that. And she opened the debate by saying that she recognized the existence of race, very good, okay, that she recognized color, and that she was raised not to be prejudiced towards people because of their skin color, also very good. But the point that I fundamentally disagree with her about is that she claimed that she had never had any advantages because of her race. Well, that's just not true. She didn't have all the advantages in the world. She was a woman, and that carries some disadvantages, but she is classified as white. And it's a very common statement made by whites when they say not only that, like I don't see color, but that I don't discriminate, or fine, but the question of whether or not you have an advantage because you're white is not really in your control. For example, if I get stopped by a cop in my car for speeding or something like that, I don't have to worry as much as an African American, at least when I'm in the United States. I don't have to worry that the cop is going to pull a gun on me because I'm white. And when I go for a job interview, I have an advantage over other people. I have advantages in all manner of spheres simply because I'm white. And it has nothing to do with what I'm thinking. It has everything to do with what the world around me thinks. So on that score, Margaret Mead was being completely insensitive to white privilege. All right. That's one thing out of the way. Now, what intrigues me is that what people do in classifying people physically is extraordinarily diverse over the world. That, for example, in Argentina, I am classified as rubio, that's white. And there are three basic classifications. There's some minor ones which I'll get into a minute, but the three main ones are rubio, which is white, moreno, which is brown, and negro, which is black. And moreno is kind of a synonym for what they also call mestizo, that is what in the United States they call Hispanic, that is darker skin, black hair, darker eyes, and so forth. And usually the mestizo, which means mixed, is mixed of white, Indian, and African in whatever percentages. Now in Argentina there was a very, very heavy prejudice against negro in the 19th century, to an extreme degree that when I went back 10 years ago, and I asked about why there were no black people in Buenos Aires, I was told, well, it's because we didn't have any slavery. And then I started looking things up. Said, oh no, not only did you have slavery, Buenos Aires was the major slave port of South America. That most of the slaves that were sent to Brazil came through Buenos Aires. And there was a large slave population in Argentina, but they were emancipated. And when they were emancipated, the government did its very best to get rid of them. They put them in ghettos, including in the area where I used to live. And they routinely sent the men off to the various wars that were being fought about borders with Argentina and Chile and Uruguay and so forth. And they were all slaughtered. And the ones that remained starved to death. So that now finding somebody who is legitimately Afro-Argentinian is virtually impossible. When you see somebody with a black skin in Buenos Aires nowadays, they're a new immigrant, usually from Nigeria. There are no people that they identify as negro. And in fact, near where I lived, they had built a museum on what was an old plantation, a slave-owning plantation, and they'd put in there a lot of documents, portraits, various artifacts, showing to the Argentine people themselves, yes, we used to have slaves, but they were taken out of the history books. You didn't learn about it because we just didn't want to know about that part of our history. And so it's slowly coming back into consciousness. But my basic point is that the fact that I was rubio in Buenos Aires gave me no advantages over people who were moreno. In that sense, Argentinos are colorblind. They don't care. And the fact that I was white in Argentina, it was the only country where this is true, meant that I just looked like a local. When I was walking down the street, many times people would stop me and ask for directions, because they just looked at me and thought, yeah, well, he's Argentino. He looks, now that wouldn't happen to me in Bolivia or Chile or Paraguay, but a substantial population in Buenos Aires looks, like me. So whether you have an advantage or not based on your physical characteristics is going to be determined by where you live. Another interesting situation happened recently. Well, not recently, it's a year ago now. When the pandemic struck here in Phnom Penh, they immediately started taking people's temperatures entering shops and malls. And it was very sporadic at first. So I went off to the Ratana Plaza Mall where I do my supermarket shopping. And the first few times I went there, nobody bothered me. You know, there was a guy with a thermometer, and he wasn't checking Khmer people, and he didn't check me. He was checking people he identified as Chinese. So here's another thing that if you're not Asian, you don't understand. People here can easily classify, it's like maybe identify, but certainly classify people based on their ethnicity. That people here have no problem not only identifying Chinese versus Khmer, which I can do as well, that's not difficult at all, but they will identify Chinese versus Japanese versus Korean. And that's an interesting one because it's not quite race, not quite ethnicity. That is, not all physical features in and of themselves will disambiguate Chinese and Korean, let's say. But when you add certain behaviors, and I'm not talking about if you hear the language, that's a dead giveaway, but there's certain behaviors and ways of dressing where if you live in this part of the world, you can say, he's Korean, he's Japanese. And it's pretty obvious to us. And one of the things that's quite common in Asia is certain prejudices concerning skin color. Now, people here don't have really dark skins, but brown enough. And the general prejudice that's fairly common in most Asian countries, that certainly the ones that I've lived in and visited, that the darker your skin, the lower class you're considered to be. And I guess, I'm not really terribly sure about this, but it's kind of like the general slur in the United States of calling somebody a redneck. You're a redneck because your neck is burned from being out in the fields all day. That you're a field laborer. So somebody who's out in the sun all day is considered to be lower class in Asia, as opposed to people who are able to protect their skins. And the place where this is most obvious is in Japan. In Japan, particularly among women, in Japan, women will pretty much always, on sunny days, carry a parasol or some way to cover up their skins so that they always remain white. And they'll also use whitening creams, and those will be advertised on giant billboards and various other advertising mechanisms to make sure that people know, okay, I've got a product that will make your skin whiter than white. And what also is curious to me about Japan in particular is that a great many, also women, not so much men, but mostly women, will have an operation to remove the epicanthic fold on their eyes, so that instead of having almond-shaped eyes, they'll have round eyes. That's considered to be a mark of beauty. And so on. So that what counts as your ethnic group and where it's positioned in the hierarchy of social values is going to be determined by where you live. Now, ethnicity is also deeply tied to nationalism. And nationalism came to the fore as the most important factor in people's self-identification in the 19th century. In Europe anyway. In other parts of the world it happened at different times, but for the moment I just want to focus on Europe. In 1815, the Napoleonic Wars were finally over, and the Congress of Vienna was able to produce a document, the Treaty of Vienna, which is signed by all the member nations and states of Europe. And its purpose was to ensure that what Napoleon had attempted to achieve, that is this massive French empire covering all of Europe, could not happen again. And so what they decided on was a system of power blocks, blocks like, well, France and Spain in the western part, and then over towards the east, there are a lot of little states. There was all these German states, for example, there's little Italian states, and they carved out one big state, which we now refer to as the Austrian Empire, although it's sometimes also called Austria-Hungary, because it was a union of Austria and Hungary. And that contained all kinds of people: Serbs, Croats, Czechs, Poles, the Hungarians, Germans, just a whole mass of ethnicities all pushed together and under the rule of the Austrian Emperor in Vienna. Well, it didn't take long. And in fact, there's a famous year, the year 1848, when the whole of Europe rose in rebellion against these conglomerations, because the individual ethnic enclaves, the Czechs, the Slovenes, the Slovaks, the Serbs, and so on, they all wanted their own nation. They all wanted to be autonomous and free from empire. And to a certain extent, that push and pull still exists in Europe to this day, because on the one hand, every ethnicity wants to be autonomous, but all of the states that are ethnically, more or less pure, I guess, are very small. And to have a whole bunch of tiny states trying to transact trade, to have their own armies, and have their own economies, their own money, and so forth, it's just very fragmented. That being able to be unified, as in the case of the European Union, is so much more efficient. And so we've got that push and pull in Europe today between the need for everyone to come together for the sake of strength, and individual ethnicities wanting to be independent. And of course that's the drive behind Brexit, that the UK, which is also made up of different ethnicities, you've got basically the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts divided up into Welsh, Manx, Irish, Scots, and so forth. So they've got their own problems, and they may also end up dividing themselves. The United Kingdom may split between England and Scotland, for example. That's an ethnic divide. Spain is made up of numerous ethnicities. There's Catalonians, Andalusians, Galicians, Castilians. Their dialects are virtually mutually unintelligible. Not so much, like Castilian and Andalusian are okay, but Catalan and Castilian, forget about it. I don't know, I can't understand Catalan at all. And that's a constituent part of Spain. And never mind the Basques. I mean, the Basques are just altogether different. So that's the world we live in today, is a world where ethnicity is pulling nations apart, and global economics is trying to push them all together. It's a very, very complex push and pull. And whenever you create a nation, you still end up with ethnic minorities. You still end up with people who don't identify with the dominant ethnicity. Now, Europe and European nations have their own problems with ethnicity, but what intrigues me a little bit more than that is the problems of ethnicity that occur within nations that are almost entirely made up of immigrants. And I'm thinking of the three that I've lived in. That's the United States, Australia, and Argentina. Now, all had indigenous populations before Europeans arrived, and all three have done their very best to subordinate those indigenous populations one way or another. But the thing about those three nations that intrigues me is that they have dealt with the ethnicity of immigrants quite differently. I've not done a study of this, and I don't know much about contemporary Australia because I left Australia in 1965. But back in 1965, when I was an immigrant there, and my school friends were almost all immigrants. I don't know whether I could put a percentage on it, but certainly more than half. I had friends from Estonia, from Croatia, from Greece, from Italy, some from England, but not many. I was kind of in the minority. Not very many of my friends were native born in Australia. And if you asked the class to put up their hands at how many people spoke a language other than English at home, you'd probably get about 70 to 80%. And the feeling that I got at the time was that most of those people were intent on assimilating. That is, for the most part, you didn't see the Estonians forming Estonian enclaves and so forth. You did to some extent with the Ukrainians. In fact, Ukrainian Australians are notable because they have their own festivals. They continue to speak Ukrainian and play Ukrainian instruments, do Ukrainian dances and so forth. So that there is some. But I didn't know of a lot of what you might think of as pockets of ethnicities in Australia. And the same is, to an extent, true also in Argentina. There's a lot of Italians, or people of Italian descent in Buenos Aires. I think at last census, something like 50% of the residents of central Buenos Aires are of Italian descent and have Italian passports. A great number of people in Argentina have two passports, and it's one of the ways, in fact, that you can leave the country for long periods of time if you can show that you have a passport other than an Argentine passport. If you have an Argentine passport, you're only allowed to leave for 90 days. When I left last time, I made the mistake when I was being interviewed before getting my ticket. I had made the mistake when they said, "How long are you leaving for?" And I said, "A year." And I showed my Argentine passport, and they said, "Well, you can't." And I said, "Well, okay, I have a UK passport." And I showed it, and they said, "Oh, okay, then you're fine." But I also don't recall Europeans forming enclaves in Buenos Aires. The Chinese did. There is a Chinatown in Buenos Aires. It's very small. It's really just like one main street and two or three streets off it. and it's tried to incorporate as a separate barrio, but the city council won't have it. And there's a growing Koreatown. There's also in Oncé, there's an Orthodox Jewish community. It keeps very much to itself. So there are pockets like that, but for the most part, Argentina has a culture, an Argentine culture, that is a genuine blend of those different ethnicities. And certain examples like the tango itself, which is kind of diagnostic of Buenos Aires in particular. Like tango is an interesting homegrown mix of influences from different parts of the world, particularly Italy and England and Spain and so forth. Anyway, it's another matter. However, when I think about the United States, I think about people as constantly thinking of their ethnic heritage. And they talk about themselves as being Italian American or Irish American. And sometimes they won't even say the American part. You know, I was in a bar playing Irish music with a couple of Irish friends of mine, and a woman came up to me and she said, I love your music, I'm Irish. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Where are you from? You know, thinking she was going to say Sligo or County Mayo or Dublin or something. And she said, oh, you know, Brooklyn. That's not Irish, but that's, you know, that people who are Irish American think of themselves as quintessentially Irish. And certain public displays, like the St. Patrick's Day Parade, is born in the United States. They did eventually develop a St. Patrick's Day Parade for a while in Dublin. I don't know whether it's still going. It was on for a while, but it was jealousy because of this huge elaborate parade in New York, which had been going on for 100 years, because people wanted to be more Irish when they were away from Ireland than they did when they were at home. Same with Italians. Well, Italian Americans in New York, anyway, is an interesting thing because most of them are not what I would call Italian. Or I mean, like, you can call them Italian, but they're actually mostly Sicilian. And as I talked about last time, the various districts within the modern state of Italy are really different ethnically. There's the difference between the north and the south on the mainland in particular, but there's a very, very, very big difference between the mainland and Sicily, to the point where Siciliano is a different language. I mean, it's a dialect of Italian, but it's very, very, very much removed from standard Italian. So when you hear what are called Italian Americans in New York using Italian phrases or names of dishes and so forth, they're mostly using Sicilian slang words or slang expressions. Like, for example, you'll often hear somebody who is like Italian American saying "capisci," you know, do you understand? That's not Italian. That's "capito" is standard Italian. The soup made of pasta and beans. In Italian American slang, they call it pasta fagioli. That's Sicilian. It's pasta fagioli in standard Italian and so forth. So in the United States, you can not entirely, but to a great extent, you can go to different areas, regions, and you will see people maintaining an ethnicity long after their ancestors have left their homeland, whether it be France or Italy or Norway or whatever, and they're still, sometimes speaking the language. That's not too common, but in Louisiana, for example, a lot of people who still speak French, as there are in northern Vermont. Minnesota, you've got a variety of Scandinavians and in enclaves. Now that's interesting to me as an anthropologist. Why did that happen in the United States in particular? Why didn't the same kind of thing happen to the same degree in Australia and in Argentina? And I don't quite know the answer, but it does create certain tensions. That is, those ethnic groups, certainly in New York, those ethnic groups, when they first arrived, were despised. The Italians and the Irish were both despised because they were Catholic, and so they took upon themselves an internal sense of pride with their festivals and parades and so forth, to say, like, we're here, we're proud to be here. And now that those people have been here, or there, the United States, 100 years or more, they're saying, when newcomers come along, people from India or Pakistan or Mexico or Central America or whatever, they're saying, no, we are pure members of the United States, and you are low-level newcomers, creating enormous political problems. Those problems are not problems of race. Those are problems of ethnicity, by and large. There are physical features, I grant you that, but it's mostly having to do with ethnicity. So, what term are we going to use for ethnic prejudice? Well, in the end, we kind of fall back on the term racism, and it's just not really appropriate, because we're not talking so much about biological features as we're talking about cultural features, which are not reflected in physiology, skin color necessarily. I mean, there are some differences in skin color between the Irish, who are very, very, very white, usually have lighter hair, preponderance sometimes of redheads and so forth, whereas Italians tend to be darker skinned, tend to have darker hair, darker eyes and so forth. So there are physical manifestations of differences, but they're not anywhere near as important as the cultural differences. And just to conclude for the moment, I'm going to have to beg off for next week, because Tuesday is my birthday, Friday is Good Friday, so we're going to shift away from this topic for a little bit. But I can ask the question, well, what is it about ethnicity? It's because we like, as humans, to form we'd like to form groups of people who we identify as similar to us. People that are, in a sense, us. And us always implies them. And usually has the connotation of we are better than them. in a great number of languages in the world, particularly Native American languages, the word for us usually has the connotation of something like real human being. In Greek, for example, the the word for people who are not Greek is barbaros, barbarian. It doesn't have quite the same connotation as barbarian does in modern English, but it's not far. I mean, it means, you know, you're not Greek, you're lesser than us, the Greeks. We are at the top of the pile. And that just seems to be something that is universal, humanly. And that also means, as an anthropologist, there's not much I can do about it. I can identify it, but I don't know what there can be done, except to say that we can differentiate between people who say, well, there's us, and then there's them, and we are different, but neither one is superior or inferior. That's possible. We can maybe start teaching that a little bit. Don't know. But that's probably about the best we can do. All right, well, I'll hold it there for the moment, and I'm going to give you my birthday cake recipe on Tuesday. Surprise, surprise. I've actually already started because it's a 5-day recipe. But I'll give you that whole birthday cake thing and some other birthday stuff on Tuesday. I'm turning 70 years old on Tuesday. And then Friday I will talk about Easter because it's Good Friday. And meanwhile, I hope you will tell your friends about my videos, that you will like and subscribe, and have a very good weekend.